So, hello and welcome to a very special episode of Double Feature Movie Club, where we are going to rank our top 5 and our bottom 3 films of season 3. This is just our opinions on these films, but it should be fun. This is one of my favorite episodes to do, and I'm joined with Diane, as always, for this. How are you doing, Diane?
I'm great, Cade.
That's great.
As always, it's good to see you.
Oh, that's great. You know, we had a really excellent season this year. It's been really fun. We've had a lot of great guests. Each episode we've had a guest. It's been a lot of variety of films. So we've had a lot of great films. We've reviewed 30 films on Double Feature Movie Club just this season, 90 in total, which is crazy.
It's crazy. I would have never thought I could have watched 90 movies, but I have done that for you, Cade.
Yes. And in the chat, we have Ava over here. Ava, our
sidekick.
One of our big fans and who's been on the show quite a bit. Hi, Ava. Yeah. And so we're going to talk about, essentially this one is, the reason we do this is it's a great recap of the season, but it's also a great way of like saying, okay, every week we say, here's what we recommend, we don't recommend, but this is a great way of saying, these are the ones we definitely recommend, and here's the ones we definitely don't.
Don't watch these movies. They're horrible. They'll make your eyes bleed.
And that's a good, it's a good indicator because, otherwise I feel like when we're just like highly recommend or I recommend, it's just like, you don't really know the strength. And I think what this does is it helps really show the strength at which we recommend or not recommend something.
Right.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. And,
and we don't always agree on what is good and what's bad.
Exactly. So important to note, Diane and I do not know what the other person's list is right now. There's no way of knowing. Outside of what we've said on the podcast before now, but there's no way of knowing.
But we've changed each other's minds too during the podcast. We'll walk into the podcast thinking, I really didn't enjoy that movie, and then maybe I did enjoy that movie a little bit more than I thought.
There's
Once
one.
I heard Diane's take.
There's one that during it that I wasn't a huge fan of, but following our conversation and then following just its setting with me for a bit, it's in my top 5. And that is what's very fascinating, is that it was something that I was a little lukewarm for before heading into our show. And so that's a tease what that one is.
That is a tease. Yeah.
But it's one that I was like, if you would have told me after watching it that it would end up being my top 5, I would have been shocked. But after our conversation, after it actually stuck with me more than a lot of them, and it's high on my list. So I guess we'll jump in here to the show.
Here we go.
Here's the rules. I guess we'll say up top, we are doing our top 5 ranked. These are all personal preferences. I would say on my list, I would not even say these are the ranking of the best and the worst films. I would not call it that, even though it's probably what the title of this thing is called. It's really favorites and least favorites. It's really personal preferences of what I like and what speaks to me and what doesn't and whatever. So make that preface. I didn't include Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer since I consider that an exhibition match. And so,
I didn't either.
So that is, I don't know wherever that would land. I kind of view that from season 1 when we did Spencer for our first episode. It was Chosen. Any one of them that are chosen that we have seen before, either one of us, I consider that to be exhibition. Which those are the only 2 films that I consider thus far to not be counted a part of the rankings. Just want to make that very clear. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else we need to say preface-wise. I've already said that these are some best of movies people consider, so I even think their bottom ones aren't going to be the worst films ever, of course. But we'll start with our bottom ones. And once again, Diane and I do not know what other person's list is. I'll go first, Diane. So the way this is going to go is our third worst to our most... what we consider the worst films first film we watched. So it's 3-1. Next one will go 5-1. Here we go. My first bottom one, number 3 for me, that we watched this season on Double Feature Movie Club, is Her Smell.
It's pretty bad.
That
was pretty bad.
That is number 3 for me. That's from episode 33 with Alex. 3 of us. I had some notes here. I'm the pro of this film. I thought Elizabeth Moss. She was very committed to that character. She was that character. I also thought it was cool that there was a lot of handheld. I love handheld shots. It was shot on film, which you have to applaud, I guess. Despite it was incredibly ugly looking. It was the most ugly looking film I've ever seen, but it was still shot on film. And opening song was good. The end credits were cool, but the story was messy. It was ugly looking. I don't know what the film was trying to say. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
I don't know.
About fame or about artistry. I don't know what the film was trying to say. And it was a waste of Dan Stevens, who was the boyfriend in that thing. And I really like him in other things.
And he never had, he had no arc, no role, no nothing.
Yeah. He was there for a lot of it.
Kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't even a punching bag.
Yeah, and then it like ends in this weird like jamboree of the artists. I did not like her smell at all. Ava also said, same Cade, my third worst is her smell. Yeah, I did not care for her smell.
It was almost my third worst.
Oh, so it's not even on your top 3?
Oh, no.
Oh, wow. Okay. I assumed, I knew you also hated
it was
her
number
smell.
4.
It was number 4. Okay.
It was number 4.
Okie dokie. And so what was your third worst, Diane?
Braid.
Okay. Yes, that's a good one.
That was really an awful movie. There was absolutely no rhyme or reason to that movie. At least with her smell, you had Elizabeth Moss, and she was giving it her all.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It had a chance of being a good movie. Braid had no chance ever of being a good movie. I mean, there was nothing about redeeming about it. There was nothing about that movie that was any good. Nothing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
there was
think of a single thing. You can even say why it's named Braid. Yeah.
I could not. Yeah, their braided hair in that.
Yeah. Absolutely the worst movie.
I thought you could have sort of defended it in the time, but yeah, I agree. It was not good. It was confusing.
This is one of those where, all these movies we watch every week, mm-hmm. I think about them for the rest of the week. And this one just got worse and worse. I would think of some scene and I think, oh my God, that was awful. Mm-hmm. Where I didn't have that so much with her smell. Other than the name. It's really gross. But
yeah, so Braid, you're right. There's more artistry behind her smell, but Braid, I mean, like it had some color, like it was the coloring was interesting. There was that scene in the empty swimming pool where it's all that jade and then the blood flies onto them when they're in the plastic.
It's just, oh my God.
Like that alone, the visualness of that scene, it's one of the most visually interesting things. So I have to give Braid points for that because I do really like that scene. The way it looks, it's like this is a lot of things for me, and so I did like that. But yeah, no, it was confusing, and I don't even know. Yeah, I couldn't follow.
Where her smell will not affect Elizabeth Moss's reputation mm-hmm. and ability to get future roles. I'm pretty sure Braid has ruined these girls. For future roles.
Yes.
Pretty sure.
Okay. Number 2 for me is probably what I was alone on this one. The other 2 people on the show, including you, Diane, and Sam, liked this movie. I hated it, and that is Kill Your Friends. I think Kill Your Friends is number 2 on my list. I cannot stand this movie. And I'm so surprised that you guys liked it.
This is the camp that you've always wanted. That you wanted in Abraham Lincoln Vampire. You wanted that campiness.
Yes.
To me, this movie had that campiness.
It did have some campiness to it. It did have a little bit, you're right. I mean, the only pro I have on here is that James Corden is killed twice. That's a pro.
Me telling you. How can you go wrong, right? Especially the way he's killed.
Yes.
Those were standouts.
Yes.
Definitely standouts.
However, the biggest negative is that they welcome you to compare it to one of my favorite films and one of what I believe is the greatest films ever made, and that is American Psycho. They repeatedly compare themselves to it. Like I would think it'd be unfair to compare a film of like, if I was like, well, this isn't as good as American Psycho to any film that we watch, because I do think it's one of the best films. But I would think that'd be unfair, but they openly, continually compared themselves to American Psycho, took beats from it, took ideas from it. And this is not American Psycho. This is a poor man's American Psycho. It has none of the nuance, none of the pizzazz, none of the social criticism of American Psycho. And so that is a cardinal sin of cinema, I think, to do that, to compare yourself to a much superior film. And it should be punished for that. It is bad. It's a bad film. And it is especially bad.
But it was only bad because it compared itself to American Psycho, which was so much better than this.
Well, yeah, it's that.
If you've never seen American Psycho,
well, that'd be
never seen it. That'd be a different story, right?
Perhaps. I mean, at the same time, I do think it's bottom of the barrel red box type movie where it's just like it's shot on this awful digital camera that they don't know how to color grade, and it's like. I know.
I'm surprised A24 didn't distribute it.
A24 is better than the A24 is art house and interesting. This is like this awful digital flat, and it's just point at it, and then like what it's saying is confusing, and it's like. It's wanting to be like, ooh, look how edgy we are, and it's like, and it like how American Psycho is, of course, but like American Psycho is saying that's bad, and this movie is just like, we're doing it for fun, and it's like, no, you can't just do that. You can't just be like, here's a bad character for being a bad character. You kind of have to say why it's bad. But if you would like to hear Cade's full take on this particular movie, yes, you can watch this episode. Yes, go ahead and watch it.
He talks about American Psycho nonstop in that particular episode.
I do. So that is why go watch that. That's episode 34 with Sam Carrico from Film Fan Club. So, yes. Diane,
Sam and I both.
Yeah, both you and Sam liked it. So so Diane, what's your number 2?
Berberian Sound Studio.
Interesting.
The movie that made no sense. Yeah. In any way, it had made absolutely no sense. No matter how hard I tried to figure out what was going on in this movie, it was not happening. I mean, bless his heart. I mean, I love the actor, whatever. What's his
Toby
name?
Jones.
Yeah. Toby Jones. I felt like, bless Toby's heart. He was suckered into this just like his character was suckered into being the sound guy on this crazy ass movie, and it was not good. The stuff that's even implied in this movie was horrible. So yeah, it's not. This was an assault on every one of my senses.
I do think that we were a little too nice to it in our review of that. That. I feel like we were a little too kid gloves with that, because I agree. I think at the time I said I liked it or whatever, but I don't. I think it's right on the. So the two Peter Strickland films, you weren't there for In Fabric, but the two, that's the line. I always talk about each time we do this the show. Where's the line? In Fabric is just over that line of I liked it, and then Berberian Sound Studio is now it's just below the line of I didn't like it. So that is where the line is for me. So yeah, I agree. Yeah. Berberian Sound Studio is on the bottom half of that line, but
it's just it's one of those too. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I was by it.
And I think, it was a bold choice to say, we're not going to show anything. We're just going to do the sound. And I'm like, that's a bold decision, but I don't think it works. Yeah. And I think that it would have been cool to see the horror instead of just seeing Toby Jones react to it. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not even really a horror. It's really just, it's just him seeing things.
It says horror thriller. No, I'm sorry. There was nothing thrilling about it. There was nothing horrible about it.
Nothing scary.
Well, there's a lot horrible, but
it wasn't. I think of like there were interesting what was most interesting about that film is the sort of retroness of like how they made the Foley work and the fact that they were
after 15 minutes that was done. I mean,
yeah, you're right. Ava's in the chat. She's saying that her second worst is The Wizard of Lies. I would agree with that, and that's why it's my number one. Wizard of Lies is the worst film we watched this season by my account. Which is shocking. That is shocking. And it was it's the first thing we watched this season. It's episode 31 with Harrison. They should be ashamed that they made this film about this. This is they made it. It was boring. It was lifeless. It was a waste of Robert De Niro, a complete and utter waste of Michelle Pfeiffer. And and most importantly, the waste of a really great real life story. There is a great movie to be told about Bernie Madoff, and this film does not do it. I don't know how such a lifeless script gets written by I think there's like 4 screenwriters on this. How it gets picked up by HBO. Yeah. It gets picked up by HBO. It gets this brilliant cast involved. It gets Barry Levinson, who's, a great, amazing, well-respected director. He's sort of fallen off. And how they produce this whole thing without finding anything interesting to say or anything interesting to do for 2 hours. Like, it's even over long on top of that. And nothing interesting happens. It doesn't say anything. It boggles my mind. And everyone should be ashamed that they made that. The only positive I have is they on his walls in his office, he has some Roy Lichtenstein art, which Bernie Madoff did collect 3 Roy Lichtenstein arts. Very famously, did not have a large art collection. Led me down a rabbit hole of learning about his Bernie Madoff's art collection and how, and that fact. And I love Roy Lichtenstein. I immediately recognized that as a Roy Lichtenstein art piece. That's the only thing, and that made me learn some things about Bernie Madoff, and I had to put that in there because I do love that pop artist. My favorite artist ever is Roy Lichtenstein. Anyways, that's Wizard of Lies.
I loved Michelle's performance in that.
I agree.
I thought she carried that. I mean, the only redeeming portion of that was really and truly her performance.
I agree.
She deserved an award for having to, number one, be in that film, and number two, pull off creating this character out of nothing, because she really didn't have a lot to work with. And she created it.
Absolutely. And that was an interesting performance by that was she transformed herself, and more so than anybody else in that. De Niro's just in makeup and but
with a bad nose.
Yes. But Michelle is trying, and it's like they don't even know how to use her. Like, she's giving this incredible performance. There's a scene that made me so frustrated in the film of she gets a phone call and learns that her child is dead. And they decide to not show her, to have her answer the phone call, and then she goes off screen and it just stays static, and you don't put the camera on Michelle Pfeiffer when she learns that, that it made me so frustrated of you don't even know what you're doing with, this is an excellent, she's trying to give Michelle Pfeiffer is one of our great actresses, and she's trying to give this excellent performance. And I do think she's succeeding despite all odds that's stacked against her for this film. And they don't even know how to, it's like, I don't, what are you doing? What are we doing here? Yeah. And so I was so frustrated with that movie more than anything, of they were lost at this, it's like someone told them they had to make this movie, and then they were like, oh, okay. They just threw some things together. And then the reporter, the fact that the reporter was played herself in the movie, and she's not an actress. It was frustrated by that film. So that was my worst. I honestly think one of the ones that I've detested more. When we posted our review, there were some people, it's like, it wasn't that bad. And it's like, yeah, whenever you do a disservice to real life stories and real life things, it kind of is that bad. It is. This is awful what they did there. So, my opinion, at least. Diane, what was your number one?
My number one worst movie that you forced me to watch this season. Keeping in mind, I didn't see them all, but this was the one that literally I have new rules, Cade.
Okay.
And we've got to start following these rules. No more standing peeing on anything or anybody. No more killing kids. The absolute worst movie that you made me watch was Climax. And you talk about the worst movie I've seen in I don't know how long. And that includes the one from last season that I couldn't even finish. That's how bad it was. And I'm just, let me tell you, Ava needs to be grateful that I watched this movie and told her not to. Because it was absolutely horrible. And the fact that they killed a kid in this movie.
They electrocuted him.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many other people in this movie they should have electrocuted, but not the kid. Absolutely the worst movie. Never watched this movie. Okay. Ever. No one. It was absolutely horrible. Gaspar Noé. Gaspar Noé was the director, like that, right? Mm-hmm. I will never watch a movie by him ever.
Okay.
Ever. Yes.
That's a shame, Diane. I don't like hearing that. I must say, yeah, I understand.
I would rather watch a bad Bernie Murdoch biopic with a great Michelle Pfeiffer, help me out.
Performance
than to ever watch a Climax again.
So
even 5 seconds of that movie would be horrible.
Sam agreed with you. He also did not like it. I think he was between us. I liked the movie a lot and you hated it. And then he was like, I didn't like it, but not. It. Yeah. So that was, if you want to check out, that was a fun episode. That was episode 34 of us disagreeing about that film. I must say on my list, before we wrap up our bottom ones, I must say that none of my three, I think, were as bad as what I considered my worst of for the previous 2 seasons. None of the 3 were as bad as High Life from season 2.
High Life was pretty awful, yeah. Although Climax to me was worse.
Okay. I disagree with that.
I can turn the sound down, but I cannot you can't not unsee some of the
High Life had some pretty grotesque things too.
Well, yeah, I did too. That's true.
And then the worst from season 1, The Endless. None of these are as bad as The Endless. So,
and those guys are still making movies. Which is amazing.
And also, as of yet, the only one that we both agreed was the worst of the season was The Endless. That's the only time we've ever agreed on what the worst of
agreed.
Of the season.
And I can see a Wizard of Lies from your perspective, because as a filmmaker, you're absolutely correct. These people should be ashamed of what they did.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that part. I think from a filmmaker perspective, but as far as watchable versus unwatchable, I could watch The Wizard of Lies. I might forget about it in 2 days, but the Climax, I'm still having freaking nightmares over that stupid movie. It was horrible. No more killing dogs, animals, kids, and none of this standing up and peeing stuff. What the hell? That wasn't even totally unnecessary. And brothers and sisters having sex, and it was disgusting. Disgusting.
So Ava had in the chat, she had watched 15 of the 30, which is actually a pretty huge number. It's second. Yeah. So thank you, Ava, for doing that. So her ranking was third worst, Her Smell, second worst, Wizard of Lies, which me and Ava have 2 of the same. And then her first worst was Never Going Back. So
Never Going Back was a hard one to watch, but from who was it? Was it Spencer that watched it with us? Or,
yes.
Yeah. From you guys' generation, I think that's kind of one of those genre that you guys appreciate more than Ava and I could, which
to me,
I appreciate your opinion of it. Let me put it that way.
And the things that are just off the list for me, I'll just quickly run these off for similar reasons as to The Wizard of Lies. Right off the bottom is First Man and Front Runner. Both of them, I think, were a waste of true stories that were I think could have been handled better. And I know I know you really liked First Man, and then Destroyer. I've heard so many good things about Destroyer. I did not like the movie.
I didn't either.
So I don't.
I mean, I might have recommended it, but does it? Oh yeah. Oh no, I hated that movie. I have a W here beside it. It was almost in my bottom 3.
I get that.
Destroyer, because that was like really awful. And what was the other one that you said that you didn't like?
Front Runner.
I agree. What a waste. Mm-hmm. Gary Hart's story was much more interesting than what they put on this film.
On paper that should work. Like Hugh Jackman, Jason Reitman, like that should work, and it doesn't. And it
just like Wizard of Lies should have worked, but does not. At least with First Man, you got some technical aspects of that were interesting, and some history there that you learn from. Mm-hmm. And even if you thought the moon landing was faked, you could see how it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Because they faked it, right?
Anyway. Don't get me started. Okay.
Now we will go to our best of list. So this is the top of the top in our opinion, and what we think are the best films that we watched here on Double Feature Movie Club. Yes, Diane did miss a few episodes, but she saw most of them, and so it'll be exciting to see what our top 5 are here. Diane, we'll start with you this time. What is your number 5 best of that we watched here?
This is so hard. I always have a hard time ranking them. Ones I get, these were my favorite ones.
Yes.
Probably number 5, I'm going to give to All Is Lost.
Okay. I loved All Is Lost.
I love that movie. I just, I could probably watch it again, even though we all know how it ends. Just because it was lovely. I mean, and it was there's something about it. Something about a movie who lets you fill in the parts that are not there. Mm-hmm. It really took advantage of that, your own imagination, and here you have just this visual to work with, no lines, and it mesmerized me, and I loved it. And I'm sure I recommended it. I wish I had put a sailboat instead of whatever I did, because I did destroy 5 sailboats making that movie, but.
That was
such
a wonderful performance. Silent. He's nearly silent.
He deserved the Academy Award for that one.
Yeah. He really so that's did. We watched that on Robert Redford night. And that was incredibly interesting film. Like before, what's interesting, Diane, is before that you were like, oh, he only says 30 or 28 words or whatever it was, and you were like, this is going to be awful. It's going to be like a silent film with Robert Redford on a boat, and but it ended up being
not the pretty Robert Redford.
Well, I still think he's pretty.
He is pretty for an 80-year-old man.
Yeah. I mean, even like with all of the Old Man and the Gun, I'm like, and he's wearing hearing aids and doing all that, but I'm like, there's something about him. There's something about him.
It really is. Well, you think how incredibly grueling it had to be to shoot that movie, All Is Lost, at his age, too, to add that to it.
And these small... closed fine thing, like then like down, and when he's underneath in the boat and the water's up, that is a very difficult performance, and to carry a film silently is not easy. It is not easy.
Not at all. And he really deserved the Academy Award for that one. I'm sorry, but sometimes, Anyway, it's tough. I had a problem putting that at number 5.
Yeah.
But if I had a number 6, it would have been the one we just watched, Only Lovers Left Alive.
Yes. Only Lovers Left Alive's just off mine too. So I guess we can briefly talk about that. It's just off mine. And I don't know if it would have been earlier in the season. It might have been like gestated and been with me. It might have went up a little bit, but I agree. It was a really, really good one. That's just off of my list. And
I've thought about it. I watched it yesterday morning, and I have thought about it off and on ever since I watched it. Mm-hmm. And you don't run into many films that really make you rethink, what you just saw. And I would watch it again. Anyway, that's All Is Lost. What is your number 5?
Diane, my number 5 is a 2018 film called Climax. So
what a horrible movie.
This movie accomplished what it set out to do, Diane. It was
give me nightmares. 68 years old, and this is besides Last House on the Left. This is the only other movie that's giving me nightmares.
Well, that can put that on the poster, Diane. You're giving them just put things on.
It was absolutely horrible. And what is this? It's a horror movie. Okay, it was absolutely the worst. New rules. No more killing children. No more.
Well, there's no way of knowing that if the movie's going to do that. I don't know if I type in a movie and the child murder. I don't know if that's going to be a good idea. But no, it was unnerving. It was intense.
Oh God.
It was enthralling, and it was captivating.
It had no point.
It was captivating, Diane. It is
it
one
had
like
no plot.
Outside.
It was just.
So, but outside of, and I agree, yeah, it didn't have themes, which is a big part of what I like. But it didn't have, but it was one of the most captivating movies I've seen, and that is the outside of like my first choice, which is my top film. Outside of that, I honestly think this is the most captivating film we watched this season. I could not take my eyes off the screen. I could not pause the film. I was completely enthralled about what I was watching. It was, yes, it was disgusting. It was, but it was
beyond disgusting. Every body function that's gross and should never be shared on screen was on screen. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was disgusting. It was just disgusting.
I loved going on my list, Diane, because this is in my top 5. I loved how completely into this film all the actors were. They were completely gave their all to it, including Sofia Boutella, who's like throwing herself around against walls for like 10 minutes straight. So this movie is a lot of one takes. It's a lot of complete. They're pushing around, going around this whole scene. So it's if you didn't watch our thing, Climax is about a bunch of dancers who take LSD. They get someone spiked the sangria that they're drinking, and they don't know who, and they didn't know that this was the case. And they're French dancers who are about to go on an American tour. And the sangria was spiked, and it's them practicing their things and then realizing that's all that. And then it turns and it becomes this nightmare for everybody involved. And the cinematography is amazing. I mean, it's tons of these one shots, and the music, these like 90s dance, music, and it's very kind of techno new wave. It's amazing. I highly recommend watching this. And I know that some people aren't going to like it. The only thing I would say, there's a middle section that goes on for like 10 minutes. That is these people talking, and there's a lot of non-actors in this movie, and that part doesn't work. And this movie's like 10 minutes long. And so cut out that or shorten it by a lot, and this movie would be perfect. It'd be perfect in my mind. It is it does what it sets out to do. Highly recommend Climax. That's my number 5. Diane, what's your number 4?
My number 4 favorite,
yes,
is The One I Love.
Oh, great film, Diane.
Great film. Anytime you can do a Twilight Zone kind of twist on things, mm-hmm. for me, it's just right in what I love the best about movies. Mm-hmm. I want to be surprised. I want to be try to figure things out. I want to be, left a little bit in the dark. I want to have mystery. And I really love the whole concept of reality being turned on its head a little bit. And this is that movie. Oh my gosh, it was so good. And it would be higher up on my list, but we just had some great films this time around.
Yes, that was during our rom-com a night, which it's.
I know, it was a rom-com.
And it was comedy, with some romance or whatever it's at, whether that's a romantic comedy, Variety called it a romantic comedy, and they've even put that on the poster. They did a lot of misleading with that. Like the movie does we won't spoil the film here because in case you haven't done it, but it has a really interesting twist that they kept secret whenever the movie came out. Mm-hmm. And I for a long time I was like, everyone was talking about this twist that this film has. And I was like, oh, okay, I got to put this on, what looks like just a normal, romance movie.
Rom-com.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it does.
And even the casting is a little misleading because you have Ted Danson, mm-hmm. you have Elizabeth Moss. I mean, it's so absolutely could be a rom-com.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And having Mark Duplass kind of makes it like interest, like, you know, that he only does these kind of odd off the wall movies and stuff. So yeah, you're right. You think it could be, yeah. So I agree. It's not on my top. It's not even kind of near the top, but I did really like it a lot. And I do think that it was a good film. I do wish Ted Danson was in it more, because that is a interesting performance for him, and he's only in like the opening scene, but he has a huge impact on the whole thing. Yeah. And I was wanting.
Well, at the end.
He's not in it. He's not his voice or what, right, or something.
Yeah.
And without sort of saying anything about
kind
it,
of a throwback.
Yeah, I wanted like a big confrontation. That's what I wanted, and they lean into about doing that.
Yeah, but you can't do that and leave it ambiguous at the end.
Yes, exactly. So they go to do that, and then it doesn't happen. Yes, good. And that was all filmed at Ted and Mary Steenburgen, whatever her name is, at their house in Ohio.
At their guest house, yeah.
Because it's her, and it's the son from Mary's previous marriage, who directed it. Yeah. Just. And it was, I was love the story, love the storytelling. Yes, and we'll
this is what a movie's supposed to do. It's supposed to entertain you and keep you on the edge of your seat, and put you in that situation where you're trying to figure something out and you just can't do it.
I love the form. We don't do that enough in film. Like rom-coms do it, where you have two central performances, male and female typically, and they're dual protagonists. That happens in the romantic comedy film genre a lot, for obvious reasons. And then using that template in this sort of thriller where you have a dual protagonist, because I love dual protagonists in general, and showing them as like foils to each other in this thriller is fun. And they kind of approach the problem that this movie unfolds in different ways. And I found that to be interesting. And that becomes the animosity between the film, is that in the crux is that. So we have Ava will catch up here in the chat. She says her fifth best was Only Lovers Left Alive. Found it very funny. Well done, even though I hate vampire stories. Interesting.
Okay.
Fourth best is Big Eyes. Yes. So there you go.
Okay, so what is your, well, I don't know what number we're on.
We're on 4.
What Ava's on? Oh, we're on 4.
We're on 4.
So what was your fourth?
My fourth was one that you weren't here for this one. This was Harrison and Spencer. It was our I believe our only in-person one this season. And I really like this movie a lot from the and everyone liked it a lot. And I would have loved to have heard your opinion on this, Diane. And it's from 2013. It's Under the Skin. Scarlett Johansson's performance is one of her bests. It is incredible. It's incredibly.
I'm going to go back and watch this.
Yes, it's a dark film. It's introspective. It's lonely. It's ethereal. She plays an alien who hunts men.
Oh.
and so she's, but who longs to fit in with the world. Yeah. And so that's and she's in Ireland. So she goes along, so it's a lot of like these highland, like it starts out in the city and then she goes out to this rural areas, and it's a beautiful film. It's foggy, it's rainy. It has such an interesting tone. But that performance is extraordinary, and the music, it's one of the best musics that we had. It's like this, it's ethereal and industrial and atmospheric. And the rest of this film is populated by non-actors, people who just live in Ireland.
Oh, wow.
And so they put so all of her scenes are very highly staged and everything. And like there's her apartment is like this blank void with like water and all this stuff. But then they put she drives around this white van, and they like rig it up with like these cameras, like these flat digital cameras. And so she's just driving out, interacting with real people as this alien. where she has like this crazy wig on and this lipstick and this fur coat. And they essentially put Scarlett Johansson out just interacting with these Irish men. And then she's trying to like bring them back to her. She's like a spider bringing them back to her nets and everything. And so you have these men who are obviously interested in Scarlett Johansson, and they're like,
I started to say that can't be too hard for her.
Yeah. And they're all, and then her not really, she's playing, she doesn't really understand, why people are reacting this way. So it's interesting. And there's so many great effects on like this low budget, like it's haunting, some of these effects. And the themes are amazing. That's the biggest part about it, is these themes of like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a woman? I think is a big part of this. What is beauty? It's this longing for love and connection, and the fact that our bodies are just these mere vessels for these things, and what's under the skin, and like the ending's extraordinary and heartbreaking, and it's essays could be written about what this film's about and what it's saying. Like, I don't even think we've in our conversation or even right here scratched the surface of what this film's about. And it's another one that we post our reviews, and we all gushingly loved it. Harrison said it's one of the best films he's seen. Spencer said it was one of the best films she's seen, and then people are like, it's not great. There's a lot of people that I don't get it or whatever. And it's boiled down to Scarlett Johansson's, nude in a few scenes in this movie, and people are like, it's just that. And it's like, no, it's not just that. It's a really thought provoking and interesting film. And, I highly recommend it. It's a great film.
Great.
Sorry, I talked about that so long. But
it took all our time with that one film. That wasn't even your number one.
That's not even number one. But yes. So that was more me convincing you to watch it too, Diane, because I would have loved to have heard your opinion on it too.
You had me at the first 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, Diane, what's your number 3?
Number 3, The Beguiled.
Okay.
I love that movie. I love the atmosphere of it. Mm-hmm. I love the women in it. I love that. Nicole Kidman and what's her name? I had it right here. Kirsten Dunst and Colin Farrell. The concept of it. I love that it's all like in this old plantation home that's run down, and they're just trying to survive, and how in the end they came together. And I just loved this movie. Loved it.
It sticks with you, and it's beautiful. Sofia Coppola, she doesn't get enough credit for the atmosphere that she creates in her films, and like the visual of these films are.
Yeah, I didn't know how to quite say it.
Yeah.
I hate to use the term cinematography because everybody always says cinematography, but it's the visual effects of it.
Mm-hmm. It seems different. It seems like dreamlike. It seems like there's nothing quite like it. Virgin Suicides is another one that she did that's like it has this feeling, and it's unique, and for what you say, we don't like the bling ring. We bring that up all the time, but it certainly did its digitalness was very much of its time, and it was a tone. And so in this one, like, she has these different tones that she does, and it creates the atmosphere. And this one is, I agree. The atmosphere is really one of those.
Yeah, you couldn't really take your eyes away from the screen and because of that atmosphere. I think that what you were saying, the production value of it, and how close it was. You know what I mean? When she did the filming of these two characters, it was very close. It was all intense around, the characters. When she had them all in the room together, you felt the closeness of these bodies together. Yes. And because their stories are so intertwined. So she gives that to you visually and in the story about how intertwined they all are and how they affect each other. And every action that occurs in that movie has a opposite reaction by other characters in the movie, and so it kept you it's intensely focused into it. There was no stepping away from that movie.
I agree.
It's one of those, you hold it. You don't put it on pause and go to the bathroom. You hold it because you don't want to miss it.
Yes. And yeah, and I think that like, and then when the sort of turn happens, it's natural and like it's shocking and like you understand the characters of how they all sort of do what they do, but then you like you kind of it doesn't like I think it's a movie that makes you, because these characters make strong decisions in it, that it makes you like have to choose like who's bad and who's good. But then when you think about it, it's like, well, no, it's more nuanced than that. But it's also like where I think you bring in your own, like it makes you reflect about who you think are the good guys and bad guys in this sort of story. And I think that's fascinating because I think people, because of gender, because of whatever their view is on you're easy to rationally say, well, this person's right. And it's like, well, no, no. It's a little more complicated than that. And I think that that's fascinating. And it's something that it's a thorny, she does the other thing that Sofia Coppola does really well is tackling these really thorny topics, showcasing it from a human perspective and making you be like, it's a little uncomfortable or it's whatever, but it's real. And
but it's human.
It's human.
And there were no good guys or bad guys in that. Yeah. They were both. Mm-hmm. Because they were all human, and they make some bold things, and it's weird that all of them make such bold choices, and you can't clearly define them as good or bad, but they, you can say, but it's a fascinating film. It really is, and beautifully made. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it wasn't in your top 5, was it? It was not in my top 5, which is why I agree. I started talking with it. It's just off my list. It's so that's another one that is just off my list. So my number 3, again, we're doing ones that we disagree on. Oh no! My number 3 was from 2018. Was Braid? No, it's not Braid. It's Never Going Back. I love this film, and I know that that was it was Ava's least favorite. And you didn't like it either. I thought for a second you were going to have that as one of your worst, but no, it wasn't a bad movie. Mm-hmm. It just the I hate to say, I'm going to say it anyway. This season has been the very worst of women and the very best of women. Okay. In these movies, the very worst of the how you could take all the facets of women. And you put them into this series of movies and you make them the worst characters that they can absolutely be. Okay. And then the very best characters they can absolutely be. For these two girls, it's gut-wrenching for for Ava's in my generation to see the betrayed, even though we know they exist, but just to see it out there and being glorified and that's hard. Yeah, that was hard. Well, it's from a female writer director. It's their perspective. Well, it doesn't matter. It's still it's still, this is how they're. It's like Braid again. Mm-hmm. Female writer director. Women being portrayed as something you would prefer. We didn't. But anyway, I understand. Yeah, if you could have a positive film about a woman for each negative one, then I'd be okay with it. But there's more negative than positive. So neither here nor there. I'm glad you liked it, though. Yeah, it's one of those things. It is that kind of Dumb and Dumber and Bill and Ted go to high school and that whole genre. And it is that, but it's like I do think it's the best of that sort of thing. And I do think that... And you don't see women in that role. You don't see women in that role. I mean, the daughters of Bill and Ted were daughters in the new Bill and Ted. But but this is done. To me, this is also from our 39th episode with Diane and Spencer. She liked it too. She liked it too, yes. Which I'm glad I wasn't alone on there. That one. Yeah. I'm glad I had some. Because that's going all women's lib on you. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I had someone having my back who was also a woman. Yeah. So, but I do think it's probably a generational thing as well. Yeah, but to me, in my opinion, I watched this film and I thought this is what all comedy films should be. Not all, probably should say. It says more comedy films should be made this way. Because I feel like we're in a bad situation with comedy films, and this is one that gave me hope for the future of comedy.
It was bold. There's nothing you can say about this film. This is a bold film. It's it's a swing for the fences film.
It's 5 or 6 years old though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It is, but it's incredibly bold. It's incredibly bold. It is it's character driven. I think that's great from a comedic perspective. It has a specific tone and vibe, which is what I love that in films. That's what we like. All of these top ones have that for me. But it's great to see that in a comedy film, whereas a lot of these studio comedies, a lot of these things, they just don't feel like anything. This feels like it has a tone and a vibe and a specific single unique comedic voice, which is that Augustine Frizzle, who wrote and directed it. That is so rare in comedic cinema, and I think this is great. Furthermore, the cast, in particularly the two leads, they're fully committed to these characters and to every bit that they do. They go for it in a way that is incredibly brave and should be applauded. And I think they stick the landing every time, which is hard for young actors of any sort to do, to be so bold and to nail it. Because I think they nailed every joke. I think we don't typically see young Americans as the punchline of films. You see a lot of more experienced middle-aged actors, even older comedic actors, willing to make themselves the punchline of things and to be kind of degraded a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the punchline of this joke. And you don't see, I think of Selena Myers, Julia Louis-Dreyfus for Veep. She said that's one of her favorite things about Veep is that she's constantly degraded over seasons and the jokes on her. And so you see a lot of actors and a lot of male actors do that, of course, obviously British humor and stuff, but young Americans, they're almost always, I know better and all this stuff. And to see them actually be, okay, I'm going to have the punchline be on me sometimes was shocking and well done. So I have to applaud the film, and it's one of the funniest films I've ever seen. So that is why it's so high on my list. So what's your number 2?
I'm going to go with The Clouds. The Clouds of
Sils Maria.
Yeah.
It is also my number 2.
Yeah.
So we can talk about this together.
It could have been my number 1 really easily, but I had another one in mind for number 1 just because anyway.
Let's talk about Clouds.
Let's talk about The Clouds.
It's the top of ours. I think it's Ava's third best. So we all have that's a unique situation, as we can tell, that we all agree that, and it's all that high on our list. So let's talk about Clouds of Sils Maria. Go ahead, Diane. You'll start this. You can start it. Okay,
here, The Clouds alone, just the clouds alone, right?
The actual clouds.
The cinematography, Zurich, Switzerland, that the setting was just scrumptious.
Yes.
The characters were scrumptious in this movie. This was a master class in acting.
Yes.
And how to do it to make it look easy. I mean, it never looked like for a second that it was hard. Mm-hmm. It was naturalist. Yeah, it was all just. Mm-hmm. It was just natural and wonderful, and I don't have enough adjectives.
Yes. So that was on our second episode of the season. We talked about 2 Olivier Assayas's movies starring Kristen Stewart. We talked about that in Personal Shopper, and this was the one I was referring to. That when I watched it, I was a little lukewarm about, and then we talked about it, and then it has never left me. Never. It is. I repeatedly think about how those characters were written and how they were performed. Those 3 central characters stick with you really well, and they are expertly done. Mostly Juliette Binoche. Her performance is extraordinary. But also Kristen Stewart, and also to a lesser extent, but also Chloe Grace Moretz. Those 3 performances are extraordinary and expertly written, and it's how it's able to say so much without being on the nose. It's subtext and like it's interesting. Like it's a very interesting film of how like because essentially if you haven't seen it and you want to, we'll say, you know, it's about, she's playing an actress who's she's sort of based on herself. There's a lot of, it has like these multiple layers to it. She's Juliette Binoche is playing a character who's very similar to herself in her own career. And Chloe Grace Moretz is almost playing like a Kristen Stewart type, which is interesting because Kristen Stewart's in the movie, and then like Kristen Stewart's playing a personal assistant, and it's all it's these interesting layers of real life, and so that colors the movie in an interesting way. But she's going back to play a role. So it's like movie within a movie of like, Juliette Binoche played there's a play that started her whole career in which she played a younger woman who fell in love with had an affair with an older woman. And that then got turned into a film, launched her film career. And now she's returning to the role playing the older woman in this play. And then Chloe Grace Moretz is playing this new starlet who's going to be playing the younger version. And what it sort of says about aging and what it says about the growing old, you know, all this, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And what it says about stardom and what it says about a talent and once in a lifetime talent. And in the fact that like, it's all said through the subtext of them rehearsing a play that she's already done before. And it's interesting. It's interesting in how it's endlessly fascinating. And
I think, and probably one of the reasons that, well, I can't speak for Ava, but I can speak for myself. The frustration of having this wisdom, you know, that you can look back and say, okay, here's where I went wrong, and here's what I would have done differently, or here's what I did do right, and trying to provide that to someone younger who is certainly not interested, does not care, thinks you're an idiot, and you're just the old gal down the street, and you'll do whatever they tell you to do, and just leave me alone. Go get me some coffee. You know, and how dismissive and how dismissed you are because you're older. And that really struck a chord with me because it happens to me all the time. Except for with you, Cade.
Yes. And the fact of the matter is like, she's scared. She's dealing with how becoming older. And like, she's like, she received a lot of praise for that young role. And the fact that like, she knew how the older role, everyone was like, oh, that was a boring role. Yeah. That other actress who did that, how people pushed that off and like made her and like everyone
and dismissed her because she was old.
Yes.
You know.
And so she's like, well, I don't want to do that role because everyone looks at the young starlet and like, and I'm at service for this sort of thing. And it's like, I like, and I don't know how to tackle this character because she's struggling with her becoming that herself. And like, that's all endlessly fascinating. And then the turn of the film, which is what it sort of says, is that she was the one that was always interesting. Like, you know, that it was always her. And the idea that like both these characters are inverses of each other, like that the one is just an older version of the younger, like it's fascinating. It is an endlessly, like it's a complex film and it makes you think really like, and I really, really do like it.
And it's beautifully shot. I want to go to Switzerland now. I very rarely watch a movie and think, I want to go there. I want to sit on that mountaintop where they were at to see the snake of whatever. I want to go there. And it was just, it was one of the finer films we've watched over the last 90 films that we've seen.
Yes. I mean, yes, it was. And it sticks with you. And it says something that it's all in our top one. Every one of us have it in our top 5. It is one of those special films that I'm glad that we watched it, and I'm glad that it was on our list because it was. I highly recommend.
And we both had it as number 2.
We did,
which was interesting, and Ava had it at number 3.
Yeah,
which some of these are so close. It's so hard to tell. Like I really struggled. I almost made it number one because I really related to her character so much.
It was number one for the longest time because it was our second episode. It was for me.
Yeah.
So that was always like, I'm like, and it was weird because like during him like that, but then it kept sitting with me. Like I think about, well, like there's that train ride. Like there's just so many. Like it has this interesting structure where it's like
shooting of that.
Yes.
How they did that, and
and then it like goes and she learns that the playwright died. Like it was supposed to be like a thing, and then she's there at this like conference where it turns into this memorial of him and how she has to speak to that, and then she's like with this actor who was always rude to her, but like and she has this history with, and like so it's like told in these really distinct 3-act structure, which I love structure, and like the way it shifts, and how the whole second act is just Kristen Stewart and her practicing this play, and how they're in like when I envision this film, it's more than just like those clouds, which is such a huge part of it, and it's visually but I just think of them sitting in that living room. And it's Kristen Stewart and her reading the play. That's immediately where I think of about this play, and how it just works of just these two people reading a play. And it just it's brilliant. And Kristen Stewart's great in this. And I think of that scene where she's driving around and in the fog, Kristen Stewart, like that's another really interesting scene. And then the third act is an extended third act where she's practicing the play. And that's all very interesting. Highly recommend it.
All three. Yeah. Yes. It wasn't dull in any way, shape, or form. Couldn't take your eyes off of it. So we got to get down to number one.
So we have number one here. So I was going to quickly. So Ava had her. So she had Clouds at number 3. Number 2 for her was Love and Mercy, the Beach Boys thing. That was just off my list. Yeah, I have it at number 7.
Yeah, it was just off mine too. Even though I don't know.
And then she said the one I love was her number 1 best.
That was a trick.
Yeah. And so also, I mean, I guess we can say the things that were just off our lists. Just off my list was Love and Mercy, Only Lovers Left Alive, and the other one that was just off of it, and I loved it. I know you guys didn't care for it, but I loved it a lot, and that's Young Adult. Young Adult was in my top 5 for a long time. I really liked that movie a lot of what it said about writers, and that's what I attached to. And like, the fact that she like listened to these young people and their conversations.
Every time, I know, I want to go into McDonald's and see if anybody's sitting there writing.
Yes,
what people are talking about around them.
I mean that I've never been like I love that. And as someone who listens to people and takes it into their themes, I'm like, yes, that's so true. But I love that film. So number 1, was there anything? What was just off your? What was your? Just
the ones that were just off my list was The Old Man and the Gun.
Yes, that's right. That's right there too.
Just off it. Just such a good film.
Yes.
And the other one, I'm calling this film was the one that made me feel good.
Okay.
And that was Hearts Beat Loud.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to feel good, watch this movie.
Yes.
Nick Offerman, lovely performance.
Yes.
Wonderful music in it. Ted Danson's in it. How can you go wrong? This is of all the movies that we watched, that one made me feel the best. I love a good feel-good movie. That was a great feel-good movie.
It was a good feel-good movie. I have it's definitely up on the top half, and so, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your number 1, Di? Here we go. Number 1.
Number 1. Big Eyes.
Big Eyes is your number 1?
Amy Adams. I mean, she just, God, I love that woman. I've yet to see a movie that she's in that I haven't loved. I loved her performance in this. I loved the story. We had a lot of biopics or biopics, whichever way you want to say that. And this was one, the very first one we watched.
Yeah.
And it was true to the story, which I loved. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that they had her at the end. They actually had the closing scene really happened. I love that part. But basically, mainly because of Amy, she just gave me this movie that I just loved and watched this movie. I can't believe I missed this movie when it came out. And I won't let that happen again.
It's Tim Burton. It was Tim Burton.
I know, like Tim Burton.
Yeah.
He sets the genre in some of this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like we were talking earlier or in the last podcast about, Abraham Lincoln,
Vampire Hunter.
Vampire Hunter. He started that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Either with Sweeney Todd or with the headless guy.
Yeah.
The Headless Horseman guy with Johnny Depp. And out of that came 12 or 13 or 14 movies that became a genre, a subgenre of horror. But he could do that. And this biopic is one of the best I've seen. And I loved it.
It was so colorful and of its time. Like, it really took in that mid-century look and the look of that artist, of what they were, I think of when they advertised it, they kind of leaned on the Tim Burton-ness of it, where like the grocery scene. That's the one scene that he gets with the wild eyes, where she sees everybody with those wild eyes.
I know. And so that's why I never went to see it. Yes. I thought, okay, this is going to be one of the dumb Tim Burton movies. Because, they can go either way, Yeah. And so, and I really could kick myself because that was a wonderful movie. Recommended highly. Forget that scene.
Well, it's a fun scene. I mean, it kind of shows things from her perspective, but I think of how, I mean, it's just an interesting story. Like, that is I'm glad that the Keens have that story, like how the history's being told on that. Like, I mean, it's something that everyone I think is aware of, but they don't know the story behind it. And I remember that was talked about like in art class, like this person very famously, and how it's now known that he was a fraud and everything. There's a fascinating story.
But I love that it was told from her perspective.
Yes.
Usually it's those kind of stories are always told from the guy's perspective. Yada yada yada. He's a crook. He's a fraud. Yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. But if this was from her perspective, and how could she let this happen? And it brings up the whole 1950s housewife and what you had to just swallow to take.
And how many times has this happened in history where we don't know?
Einstein. Mm-hmm. Can we just talk about this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where was the wife?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's there's presidents whose wives essentially signed things and did things while they were bedridden and things. So, I mean, it is a well documented in the fact that this gets, it's known and that it, this movie, it's a great movie. I do recommend it. It's up there, too, for me. But it's
I was surprised you didn't have it in your top 5.
Yeah, to me, I think it goes a little goofy by the end of it. Like, I understand that it was real life that that
she really did those things.
The trial becomes so over the top and goofy, even though it did happen. I know the truth's stranger than fiction.
Sometimes real life.
Yes.
But I kind of loved that they included it because it was so goofy. Mm-hmm. It's like, you won't believe what really happened here.
It takes a hard left turn with he's this villainous guy, and then he turns out he's just a goof, and it's like and everyone So I don't know. That's the thing that sort of has a bad taste in my mouth is the hard tone shift it does. Yes. The
narcissistic personality of his.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. What was your number 1, Cade?
My number 1. Do you know what it is?
Personal Shopper.
No, it's not Personal Shopper. Personal Shopper is actually in the bottom half of my thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. It's going to be one of these I didn't see, maybe.
It's one of the ones you didn't see.
Yeah.
And I have to say it, when I saw it, I immediately this is one of the best films I've seen. I know I think you've even watched it, but you weren't on that episode.
Oh, Cold in July.
It's Cold in July.
The boy film.
I don't know if it's we could jump into that. We want to, but that's episode 42 with just Alex and I. I love this
film.
I thought it was so, and to call it a boy, this movie is almost anti-men, I think, in a film about all men. To me, that's, and it's good. I mean, that's what the themes are.
I kind of love that, though. I mean, I love the fact that you take this guy's totally pussy whipped, right? That's what they call guys like him, where the wife picks out the flowered cushions and stuff like that. And he does what he's told, yada, yada, yada. And he's probably a good dad and all that stuff. And he meets Don Johnson.
Yeah.
Who's swinging it, right? Has to tape it to his leg and turns him into a man. What a
boy! You have a completely different view of that film than I do. That is
really?
a completely different.
It does kind of start. Remember, she says, "I thought I decided on the floral," and sure enough, 3 scenes down, you've got the floral design.
Yeah, I thought this movie, this movie, it has
Coming of age.
So this movie, so whenever I look at films, the big 4 things that I love about films, characters. I look at characters when I look at films, which is performances, arcs, and mostly unique relationships you don't typically see, which I think is something that all my films in my top 5 have. Clouds of Sils Maria, those are unique, interesting relationships. Never Going Back's an interesting relationship. All of these, Under the Skin, less so Climax, certainly interesting. But no, this film, these complete strangers end up going on a thing together, and it is unique, interesting relationships that come along from this, and excellent performances. These 3 central performances, I think, are just some of the best performances in this type of genre. In what type of genre this is, I can't tell you. It's a thriller, but it's also got elements of noir. It's got elements of it's sort of a crime thriller, but it's also like a family drama. It's kind of a procedural. It's interesting. It's a lot of things. There's elements of horror in it. It is a unique, constantly evolving film, which is what structure.
And it had a twist.
It has a twist.
And
yes,
it has a twist. Yeah.
It has a few twists, I would say. It has a unique structure. It has a structure is a huge part of what I watch films for. I talk about it all the time on the show, almost probably too much. I don't know if you guys enjoy that when I talk about structure a lot.
When you start talking about structure, we stop listening.
So I talk about, there's a 3-act structure, but I love a film. Some of my favorite films of all time have a 5-act structure. And this movie has a 5-act structure. And each act completely pivots genres and pivots characters and pivots point of view and pivots theme and intention. Like each part is a uniquely different film, and new characters come along and new perspectives, and the characters shift and the genre shifts, and it constantly keeps you guessing about what the movie is about and where it's even going. And but at the whole time, I know it's in sure hands because each act has been unique and interesting. And you start off the film, and Sam Shepard's character is the villain, and you obviously think, oh, this guy, that's what the whole film's going to be about. This guy is going to come here and he's going to, try to exact his revenge and everything. And then it unfolds. There's a larger plan in place, which is where the noirness comes in. It's almost like a Raymond Chandler. There's bigger things at play. The government's corrupt. There's people that are, the bad guys are really the good guy, and all this stuff. And that there's a larger corruption at play. And then so you bring in almost a detective, a private eye, and it's Don Johnson who's playing this comedic Texan private eye, and he is so unique and it just chews the scenery. And Don Johnson just is amazing in this film. Themes is what I watch films for. Themes, something that gives you something to think about our world and the people in it. And this film has so many unique themes that it sticks with me. It's almost about. You say it's a guy film or whatever, and it certainly is about all these men and everything. But to me, the film is about men only know how to destroy, and how the film is that they don't know how to build things. They don't know how to create. They only know how to destroy what's around them. That's evident from the opening film, and they only know how to fix things through destruction. And they're all don't know how to fix the problems of the world. They only know how to shoot things and destroy the things around them. And that only causes more pain. And what is the role of men and fathers in the modern world? It's set in 1989. The modern world's coming along. You can't be the gun-toting, savior of Western's past, because this film's also kind of a Western, but has this. But at the same time, it's blue. It's shot blue. It has a synth score. It's very much about modern era coming in and doing all this stuff. It's so much interesting things to chew on. And then lastly, it's tone. And the tone of this film, you can just feel it. And it's with a low budget. It has some of the most beautiful cinematography I've seen. It's this teal blue at night. There's a lot of night shots. It's shot at night, but it still uses teal and blue in interesting ways. In the day, it looks just normal or whatever, but it is so beautiful, and you can feel it. You can feel this film and how it uses its era so great. How it uses the VHS tapes and how it uses all of this unique thing. The horror of that. There's a scene in this with this VHS tape that is gut wrenching and some of the most horrifying things I've seen. And it is about the evil of man, and it sticks with you in a way that I can't. It's affecting, and you can get why it affects the characters that way. This film you can feel, and I highly recommend anyone watching it. It's a dark film. It's an incredibly intense film. It has some comedic things to it with Don Johnson's character, but it never feels like it's unreal. I love this film. I think it's the best film we've watched this season. Cool.
So, we only had the big gap, I think, is on Climax.
Yeah.
As far as my worst film, my worst nightmare, and one of your favorites. I just can't get over that part of it. And that's about the widest gap. I think we did agree on Clouds of Sils Marie. I keep wanting to say Saint Marie, but Sils Marie.
Sils Marie.
We did agree on that one.
Yes.
I think we also agree a lot on like Big Eyes and Hearts Beat Loud. I think we both appreciated that movie.
Yes.
Love the music in it, that's for sure. And
Only Lovers Left Alive was just off both of our lists. I think with more time I could have maybe come around to it a little bit more, but yeah, that's another.
It's going to be one that I'm going to think about for a while.
Yes, and
it'd been higher up on the list. If we'd have watched it sooner, I probably would add it in my top 5.
I agree
for sure.
I must
Love
say,
and Mercy is a good one. I thought it was. I think, but I even had that one as number 2. I think that's a really good
number 7
movie.
On my list.
I almost wish it had just been then you wouldn't appreciate really appreciate the acting that he did. What was this?
Paul Dano.
Paul Dano, yeah. Because he was fantastic in it.
He was.
And I thought it was a really good movie depicting what Brian Wilson went through in that period of time.
I agree. It was a really good film. I must say, just like how I said, none of our bad ones were as worse as what I considered my top 2 bad ones. I would say that none of these films, as much as I said, I obviously love Cold in July and all those. To me, none of these 5 were as good as Maggie's Plan, which was my season 2 best one. I love Maggie's Plan so much.
I gotta admit that Maggie's Plan was a good movie. It had everything.
It had everything. It's also another one that had an interesting structure, 5-act structure. And it was also, I think it says something about what my favorite films are, of these weird 5-act structure films that shift and change and constantly evolve. And that's Hereditary did that. Sorry to Bother You. Sicario. Some of my favorite films ever have these tones in which, or this structure in which they shift and do different things. And Maggie's Plan does that while being a romantic comedy. And I think that's great. And what's a 5-act structure, just to say, it makes it feel epic. It has a Shakespearean type structure. When something has a 5-act structure, it makes it feel larger than life and unique. So that's what's interesting about 5. I could write essays about 5-act structure because I don't think it's talked about enough. And then also, I don't think either is as good as my season 1 favorite film, which was Blackcoat's Daughter. That
was a good movie. That really was. I have to agree with you on that. That was a good movie. I don't know where I had it on my list, but it was really a good movie.
Yes.
I missed seeing 3, 4, 5 movies this season, but the ones that I did see, I thought this was a really good season for movies. I think we had some interesting differences. But then at the same time, I think that we had interesting ones that we liked, that both of us liked.
Yes.
That had, the structure that you love so much, and I came away either learning something or feeling better about something, or just thought provoking.
I mean, it's all different. On my list it's different things, and your list too. It's different genres and everything. So we'll continue to have a variety here. We'll continue to have on great guests. We've met a lot of great people this season and had them on, and we'll invite them back and everything. And it will return in the fall. We'll announce a date later. If you don't follow us on Instagram and Twitter, you should. It's at Double Feature MC.
Exactly.
We'll have content posted throughout there, throughout the season or throughout the hiatus that we're having, and we will announce when we'll return. It'll be in the fall. We will have a bonus episode in the summer coming up soon. This will it'll be Oppenheimer and Barbie. We'll do that double feature. So
I can't wait to go see those two.
So stay tuned for that. That'll be a rare summer bonus episode, a double feature. So that's something to look forward to. And then we will return in the fall. So Diane, I love doing the show with you. It's great. It's 3 seasons. We've done 3 seasons. It's been really nice, and I love talking films with you, Diane.
I love talking films with you too, Cade. I always learn something talking to you about movie making and films. And of course, the behind the scenes portion of it. I just know what I enjoy watching. And I don't even know why most of the time, which thankfully you explain it to me. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, it always amazes me how we can watch the same movie and you could love it and I could hate it. Yes. Like Climax. What could you possibly love about that? Anyway,
it did what it was supposed to do.
I know, you told me that. And it did what it was supposed to do. I guess give me nightmares.
Yes.
And So,
and shouldn't you like that? Like, I mean, like, yeah, I understand that you don't like. Don't you like that you don't like that? It's like that. That's the thing. That's like. There's like.
I don't understand that. Why would I want to go through that? But at the same time, I'm really glad that I've had the opportunity to watch 90 movies with you.
90 movies, yes.
90 movies.
Well, if you have any recommendations, send it to our way. Because we'll start to be putting together our list for the next season soon. So we will do that. Stay tuned. Follow us, Still Feature MC. Rate us 5 stars. Give thumbs up or whatever. Subscribe, like. Tell your friends. Heart. Yes. Click all the buttons.
All the buttons.
All the buttons.
Next
thank
thing
you, Diane.
There'll be a behind-the-scene documentary about it. And Ollie.
No. Oh, Diane, thank you for another great season.
You too, Cade.
Well,
bye.
Bye.